let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it. Today we're welcoming to the show for the first time. Today we've got thiccbro.
Hello. Thanks
Hello.
for having me.
Thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am on vacation right now at the
Oh.
Jersey Shore. Much needed. It's a little chilly, but we're dealing with it. And still going to be in our Speedo on the beach.
Listen, if you've never seen thiccbro in a Speedo, we would when we get to the end of this episode and you get the socials or you see it in the show notes, you better go look at this man in a Speedo because goddamn, this is
Oh, well, thank you.
stunning, gorgeous, but that's obvious at this stage, my goodness. But listen, thank you so much for being here. We've had some conversations and we've got you on today to talk about a potentially divisive topic, talking around things like saline and silicone. So, I mean, for listeners, before we kind of get into this, I want to be very clear that the premise of today is to give perspective based on experience and based on understanding. We're not talking about promoting ideas either which way. We're not talking about where you can get things or how to do it. But what we are talking about is real experiences and, Tim's obviously got the medical knowledge as well. So this is where we're coming from. Don't add us. We're trying to have a conversation and get the ball rolling on that front. So listen, thiccbro, are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, listen, first things first. Can you explain, for yourself, those particular things? What are the things that you're interested in, and where did the interest in those things manifest for you?
I think I've always just been into obscene cartoon features and body types, right? Like oversized muscles, huge bulges, that kind of thing, and the instant transformation we've seen in cartoons when we've been growing up. So that's really where the big thing is. Just always loved having a huge bulge. So saline obviously was the gateway to that, where it's a little safer. You can see and it goes away and then you could live your normal day, right? But just having that and just being able to walk around with it, and even if I didn't leave my house, it was really hot just to have that bulge in the Speedos that I wear out now.
I mean, I can imagine that it's very akin to the kind of gainer experience, right? Like when you put on those first 5-10 pounds, nobody else can see it necessarily, but you know that it's there and you can just feel how you exist in your body differently and in such a positive way for having it as a part of you. So I think that's quite easy to understand. I mean,
The only body modification I've ever done was a tattoo, and I want more of them, but I don't have several grand to drop on full sleeves at the moment. So when I do, I'll slowly build up. I want to have full sleeves down both arms, but I've never had any other body modifications, and I've never had a desire for any other.
it's good to bring up tattoos and the concept of piercings as well, and other types of body mods that people do. I know people get ear scalping done and all sorts, and it's body modification, I think, is a wider conversation around a couple of other different pointers. So if there are people listening who have, experienced other things or tried other things as well, please reach out to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. I think that would be fabulous to talk about those intersections with body mods as well. But coming back to your experiences, Thic, it's really cool to hear about how, you always kind of had that desire for that bigger bulge and things and getting stuff done. So talk to us about how that intersects with your gaining journey.
Yeah, I mean, I remember vividly episodes of television shows where the guy would gain quickly. The one specifically was Big Wolf on Campus. And there was an episode where his best friend, there was spider people that would like feed people to get them like chunky and eat them. And that was like probably one of the first things I remember. So, I mean, I've been on Grommr for ever. And my journey has been, you know, muscle, belly, back to muscle. Now we're muscle belly. So it's like constantly changing of how I identify, but I always have been into that kind of transformation. And I think with the saline, it's that instantaneous gratification at the end. It doesn't take that long. You have something to show for it. Like, you know, gaining is a long journey, not just a stuffing session, which, contrary to popular belief, I really hate eating. So as a gainer, it's not ideal. I would much rather drink all of my calories, but
eating can be a really big inconvenience sometimes.
it really is. And I know so many encouragers are probably like crying if they listen to that, but
Well,
I'm working on it.
that's the reality, right? Like, for all of us who started off skinny, like, I don't know anyone who just, like, by virtue of birth and existence has this fucking appetite. Like, where do you get it? It's hard. Like, you have to work and earn that shit, right? So, I relate. Like, if I could make the belly fat a lot more instantaneous, bitch, I would do it, and I would do it every day.
I'm sure a lot of people would.
Would save time.
Yeah, a lot of time and a lot of money, question mark, maybe.
Well, you know,
But
here's a question then. So, like, because obviously you put in quite a substantial amount of work in the gym, as you say, at this current part of your gaining journey, that's a focus. Like, do you ever feel like there is a need to balance the kind of like quote unquote work ethic of like putting in the hours at the gym versus like the instantaneous gratification of what you get done? Or do you find it kind of actually not that difficult to balance the two?
I don't think it's that difficult to balance now. Like when I first like really gained, it was in 2020. I was like after a relationship. So it was no muscle. It was just fat. So now I want to bring it like the belly back with what I've built just to see one how it like, but continue on with the muscle too. So weird, you need to eat to grow. Who knew that concept happened? But once I've actually started like doing, I don't really weigh all the food, you know, I don't make sure like I hit certain things. I just, if I see it, I eat it. Like I do like the chicken and the rice, but I just try to eat like a huge quantity of it. And then I have seen exponential growth since actually like doing that. So
I mean, from your use of materials, and I think based on what you've said, you've primarily done saline. Can I inquire, have you done silicone?
I have, yes.
You-
I now am officially silicones. So I will no longer be able to do saline. Once you do make that jump, you cannot go back.
Why?
It's very unsafe. There's a lot of like more risk of infections. And that's really, there's a lot more info on that on the webs of why you shouldn't, but it's just a hard no to do that. There are other things you can do with the saline in different parts of your body. I have.
Well, plus the silicone is permanent, right? It's now taking up space in the cavity, so there's no room for the saline to go.
Yeah, it would like fill in the gaps, but yes, you're right. It's not the silicone is there until
it's removed.
Get it removed, if that's something that I would like down the road.
Yeah, totally understand.
But I have done infusions on my chest before, which is also very hot. And then I just saw someone do like lip injections with saline. Obviously, the world is your oyster with the saline and how, you know.
That would seem really impermanent to me and impractical to do it in your lips.
I mean, it was a very short clip. So I'm not really sure how long it lasted.
Yeah, I can't imagine that would last very long.
No.
But I mean,
but it looked hot.
Would you say that saline is the bloating of the injectables?
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, I mean, it also like depends where you are. It depends how hydrated you are. It depends how quickly your body will absorb it. You know, if I did, and how much you can put in. Right, it's all up to your body on how much it will accept space-wise. There's only a certain, you know, a ball sack is only so big when it's stretched.
Yeah.
There are some things that are, I think it's the dextrose and glucose, like continues to swell after you put it in. So there are other things besides saline that you can get to inject. But yeah, I mean, it depends how much you do. It usually lasts like 24 to 48 hours. And as soon as you're done, it's like the max as soon as you do it with the saline, and then it slowly dissipates throughout the 24 hours.
Like a water balloon that has like a leak in it, just slowly leaking out.
Yeah.
That makes
on
sense.
the inside. It doesn't leak out at all.
Yeah, it's not going to leak through your skin. It's just going to be reabsorbed into your bloodstream.
But look, this is also fascinating to me because I think one of the major reasons, obviously, we want to have this conversation is because it is so divisive for so many people. And for someone like myself who, like, I hold no judgment for it, but I also don't know anything. Not really. I have had no experience. I don't have these active conversations. So I think this is really fascinating stuff. I mean, to pause a moment here, like, do people in general know that this is something that you engage with, or do you tend to keep it more to yourself?
I mean, definitely keep it to myself. You definitely find those people on the interwebs that are also into it. I have been open about it with partners. It's either I am like on the journey of deflating, and then I go to like hook up with someone and I'm like, oh, by the way, this is what I do. And this is like where I'm at. So they might be a little bigger than you're used to. That one particular guy was really great about it. He was fine. My ex, though, like I was always into like pumping before, which I guess like I said, like saline is like the gateway, right? It's like you pump first. Usually this was my journey. Is like I had a pump, I did that, it takes a fucking long time to do it. So but that's also really hot. But I would like I told my ex, like we were talking about, kinks and what we were wanting to try and into, and like he laughed at me. So that didn't feel great. Because he was like, a lot of people that aren't in it or know it, like their only reference is like Austin Powers has it like in one of the episodes or in the movie. So that's what he kept getting to. So obviously we all could imagine how terrified I was that I was being laughed at.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not the reason we broke up, but but now I'm very open about it. Obviously, now that I'm silicones, people notice a little more. I mean, I'm not huge by any means. I'm like pushing large for natural. So when people like notice it, if they know, like there's only like a handful of friends that I've told.
Yeah.
They have all noticed when I am in Speedos on the beach or at the pool with them, in a thong around the house, whatever. Like they have noticed differences. There are a few people, my friends are very supportive of the ones that know of like my Twitter and my Instagram. So they've seen growth, but no one really comments on it.
Right.
So, which is interesting because like most of the people that I've interacted with that have had some kind of modification with silicone, they went for hyperreality. And so like I've run into people who like you can see that before you see anything else, because they've had to make so much accommodation for how much bigger it is now that like it's very prominent and very noticeable. Looking through your pics, I was like, I if you didn't tell me, I wouldn't know. You went for a much more realistic looking.
I don't want like massive like changes of my everyday routine, or like I want to be able to dress normally and it not be like completely obscene for me. I think it's very hot that the guys, like some of the guys that are massive. I have no current plans on growing any bigger, potentially down the road, but that's not on my current agenda. But I really enjoy the size I am now. I already I had to buy new Speedos because a lot of Speedos are they try to conceal everything because you're out and about. So I have to find like underwear with pouches now, and it just makes it a lot more comfortable.
It makes sense. And I suppose, like, again, there's comparisons to gaining. Some gainers, and the ones that everyone seems to talk about, are the people who want to get to the obscene sizes, 400 pounds plus, right? And those are the ones we talk about. But also gaining to being just 200 or 250 is also valid. Pumping, growing, or injecting just to the point of just a little bit is also fine. And I think that again comes back to a wider conversation on scaling, and you don't have to go all the way there in order to be valid or appreciated. You can just do a little, and that's totally fine too.
It's up to you. It's a very personal journey. You should only be doing it for yourself, how you want. Should not be doing it for anyone else, being forced to do it. So this is like, all of these things are my decision. Obviously, the fantasy of wanting to grow more with someone, like that's my thing, is like, I would love to be owned, grown himbo for someone, with someone. But with the reality of, I'm still my independent adult male, that I will do what's right for me, but bringing you into like the body growth or eating with you or for you.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. And I suppose, like, I imagine that there are people who will listen to this and feel challenged, by potential, shall we say, preconceived notions on the process. But there may also be people listening who are curious about the process and are curious about aspects to it. And we won't ask you, of course, about, where to find things or what to do, because of course that's what Mother Google is for, people. Go and Google. I'm sure there are forums aplenty with this. But I do want to ask you, for anyone listening who might be considering this, what is like the biggest piece of advice you could give to someone who's like, I'm not too sure, how do I, like, what advice would you give to the person who's considering it?
Just do an obnoxious amount of research and take time to think about it. There are a lot of complications that can happen. It is a very dangerous thing. I also do steroids, which is another, moot point to a lot in the community, that they're very against it, but that, so is Botox and fillers in your face and, any kind of other things. Obviously, some are more extreme than others, especially if you're injecting on your own or getting it professionally done. But a lot of things that you do have, consequences or, bad side effects, and you just need to weigh that option for yourself, and if it's worth the potential negative for the outcome that you actually want. So
and did you inject yourself, or did you go and have a doctor do it? Okay.
Yeah.
You did it yourself. Okay. I just hear so much in relation to gaining, people who debate whether or not to gain and focus on pure fat. What if I get health problems? Okay, people have health problems. Like, you just need to decide if you're willing to potentially run the risk of that. And it's not to say that you can't like gain in a more like objectively healthy way with certain food choices or lifestyle decisions you can make, but you're not infallible. And I feel like everyone kind of needs to remember that, like, we're all like sacks of meat and blood, and we're all going to die eventually anyways. So like, your death is not inevitable. Like, you can't prevent it. You will die one day. So like,
like, I am very open with my doctors about everything that I'm doing. Every 3 months when I get my prep blood work, I also ask for a full panel for my blood work, just to make sure all of my levels are good.
Yeah.
I was taking something and now my levels were a little high, so now we're monitoring that. So it's like, I'm very open. My doctors know about my injections also. I did have a little bit of a complication at the beginning.
Really?
That has since corrected. It's nothing crazy, but we just, I went to a urologist. It fixed itself, so I didn't have to do anything, but things do happen. So I am very open. I know a lot of people, even on steroids and gaining, are not open with their doctors, because a lot of they say they need to say certain things. Obviously, my doctor, every time we talk about it, tells me, you're not supposed to be doing this. This is higher than the amount. These are the side effects. So just being open with them. It's in my chart. God forbid something does happen and I go to the hospital and I'm not unresponsive. My friends don't know exactly what I'm taking. They don't know, the
Whereas
exact.
your doctor will have that information, and it could difference between this person needs a specific amount of a dosage to bring them back versus if they don't know and they give you the wrong dose and it could actually end up being fatal. Like, this is a conversation we've actually been having a little bit this season already. Like, the importance of communicating about the truth of yourself, not simply on a social level, like confiding in friends and building community on that level, but also medically speaking, because understandably, America, I know your medical situation, she's fucked. I understand. It's wild. But, you know, for those of us who have the privilege of living in countries with universal Medicare and things of that nature, you know, I do think there is a benefit in, at the very least, being open about the fact that, like, you're not trying to lose weight just so that, like, things can be tracked and just made sure of. Like, a lot of people who worry about gaining worry about, like, getting health problems, and, like, how the fuck are you going to find out about them if you're not going to a doctor to get tested, you know? So I think there's such a parallel there, and it's so important for everyone to just be so aware. And again, decisions for yourselves, do what you like for you, but it's all about weighing it all up at what's correct. I do want to ask, if I can, um, this is something I've always been a bit curious about, because you know how people say shit and you just go, I don't know if it works like that, but then it sort of sits in your brain and you're like, it could, I don't know. But I want to ask, and feel free to, if this is not the case, with the parts that have been siliconed, do you have to, like, knead it back into being the shape? Like, if you put weight on it or you bend it by accident or, like, put your fingers too hard, like, can it dent / leave an imprint?
I don't. Mine does not.
Maybe
But
because
I'm sure,
it's gone as
like,
big, but, like, possibly others, if they did, would that be, like, a thing?
so like what your body does is like it encapsulates and like puts like scar tissue around it. Tim, and like correct me if any of this is
No,
completely
yeah,
inaccurate.
you're right.
But so it kind of attacks it because it's a foreign substance, right? And it wants to keep
Right.
it contained. So that's like kind of what it is. It's just like a harder tissue like around it. So I know, like, I was never really into like rough ball play. I'm really not really into ball play now. I just like having big balls. So I know I got a lot of guys see it and they're like, oh, I want to smack them. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
I
no,
don't,
bad
I
idea.
don't feel like that. I don't think that's good because there's things in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bad idea.
It's like the really, really unfortunate piñata situation waiting to happen.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, mine are not like that. They do get like when it's cold, they get like obviously they still shrink. So it's a little bit of a harder substance. So like it's much better, you know, you do massage them when you're in the shower, like nice and warm. But it's still like kind of I'm at the size where they still contract and release.
So to pique your mind about this, do you feel like there is a lot of steroid use potentially within the gainer community?
I from what I have heard from certain guys, yes. I think the steroid usage is a lot more common than people are leading on. I try to be as open as I can on social media without posting it on every post. I'm very open about it if anyone ever asks like what I do. But I think especially like maybe if not the use of, but the curiosity of wanting to use it is very high in the muscle gainer, like beefy muscle bull community for sure.
Certainly, as you would have heard on our roundtable talk, I'm petitioning to start referring to collectives of muscle gainers as meatballs.
Yes, I did love that. Because I know, you know, and again, a lot of people, especially like that episode, I liked how everyone at the table were kind of like different viewpoints, right? Like some people are completely natural, some people were admittedly not natty anymore, and even like some viewpoints were like that's cheating, like you just need to put in the work, which I completely agree. It is not a magical substance that you instantly take and you are instantly ballooned. Like you need to still eat, like we talked about before. You still need to like work hard. I go to the gym 5 to 6 times a week. So without that, and I will even say like my first 2 cycles, I completely wasted it. It was a waste. I shouldn't have done it. I was stupid, young, and naive. It was a waste of money, a waste of like putting my body through that toxicity. I was not dialed in the gym for my routine, not dialed in on my diet. So a lot of people would look at my photos now and be like, oh, how many cycles have you done? And that's what you look like? Like, I don't think you're on steroids. Like, if you did look at my profile and you didn't know, I'm not like a monster. So people would never even like think like, oh, he's on steroids.
Well, yeah, I'm sure people have some preconceived notions about what steroid use will do to you in the first place. I'm sure they think that you're going to be this like roided out monster that
like
suddenly is like
goals,
huge and
obviously.
like.
But it takes a while to get there, like every kind of gaining. I have had like friends of friends and like family friends on my personal accounts like message asking if I'm taking something or and I will say I say no to them because they don't need to know.
I agree. I've said before that family doesn't need to know everything.
No.
Some people tell their family members everything. Some people in the community, like their parents, know they're a gainer. Everyone knows they're a gainer. Me personally, I'm just like, there's some shit my family just does not need to know, and there are things that I never intend to tell them.
And the one specific that I'm talking about was my sister's friend, and she's a doctor, and she asked if I was taking growth hormone, and I said no, and I wasn't lying because I'm not taking HGH. So she had a very specific question. So I was like, no, I'm not.
You
But, like, I'm honored. Thank you so much.
I love that. I love that. No, I just think it's so interesting because again, I'm hearing so many parallels to like just how, and again, I think I want to focus on this, right? Because I think because there's so much, not to say misinformation, but obviously there have been some big things that have occurred in the queer space regarding injectables that perhaps lead toward a lot of negative dialogue. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case. And I'm hearing just so much in alignment with what gaining is in general, you know? And it's because obviously you're gaining in tandem with that, but just even on its own, it just feels like there's so much that all of this just has kind of like in common. And I feel like it feeds back into that thing that like gaining is not like on an island, it's not alone. It's like we are like neighbors to so many different concepts that all just kind of like build out from one another, right? Like it shouldn't be that surprising. And I want to ask, we talked a little bit about steroids, saline and silicone. Do you feel like there is a sizable portion of people in the community who engage with that or not?
So I don't know if I'm just like on the side of Twitter now, but I am seeing a lot more guys get into the saline. Like it is on pages that I have been following for years that are more like muscle like growth, and now their bulges are massive and they've tried the saline. They might not say it, but as someone that does it and is into that, like I can definitely clock what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when you're on Bigger City, you can actually spot the gainers as separate from the bears because everyone's out there with bellies, but the gainers are the only people who have like the belly perfectly lit and they've got their hands cupping it and cradling it. Like when you know, and you can see it. So
exactly, yeah. So there are a lot more now, but like I said, I don't know if the algorithms have clocked me for Twitter and know that's what I'm looking for, but yeah, there's a lot more guys into it than I thought. And even like with that, you said there's a lot of forums out there and different things like resources on the internet. And I've learned a lot about different kinds of body mods being part of those that I have never heard of before. So it is very interesting to like browse those channels just to see and learn more about, I might not be into it, but it's interesting to see what others are and how much more there is to the body mod kink than just gaining piercings, tattoos, silicone, saline, that kind of thing.
I always think of the oh gosh, and I cannot remember his name. I'm gonna have to Google this afterwards, but I think he goes by the Alien. You know, he was this like
Oh yeah.
he was this muscle build dude, and he's had all sorts done. Like he's had his ears scalped down, his nose
His
removed.
nose removed.
Oh yes, I have. I just saw him. Yeah.
And there's also other people. Again, I can't remember his name, but I believe he passed away. He was a model that was very popular back in the early 2010s. He was basically painted, like tattooed like a skeleton from head to toe. I believe he was queer. So I think we've seen examples in the zeitgeist that, extreme body modifications are very much a thing. And there are people who are just, if you ask them, why did you do this? What is the goal? It's just in me. It is within me to want to do the thing. Just like with gaining,
Yeah.
I do want to ask, when you have those conversations with people inside the community about, the things you've had done, the things you'd be considering, etc., what is the kind of response from people?
I mean, I guess it depends where you're engaged in that conversation. If it's like randomly on Grinder, some people are into it. Some people just say like, you have big balls, and I'm like, okay, you don't know why they're big, so we're just gonna go with, yeah, I have big balls. But there are a lot more guys into it and know what it is on there too, even with gaining. Like there's so many more guys. Like in my profiles, I now put like beefy, trying to get thicker, into bellies, like thick boys, like to the front. And as soon as you like add that, like civilians that you
They
think
come
are
out, girl.
so into you growing, like wanting to rub your belly. And I'm like, yes, please. Like you just got to be open about it. And
Yes.
because of that, and like outside of, I've learned a lot after that last relationship, but I am so upfront with like my kinks, what I'm into. And it's like, if we're not matching on that,
It's a no-go.
and it's a no-go, and that's okay. Like we're just not into the same things.
Yeah.
I had a really hot guy on Sniffies. I was like, this is perfect. Like this is gonna work out. And then I was like, oh, I also have silicone. And he was like, honestly, like that really doesn't do it for me. Like we did match up for everything else, but that's like a hard no. And I was like, and I had to be okay with that because that's my choice. I was bummed. He was real hot and had a great dick, but I was like, no, I guess like that's on me. And that's something else you need to realize. Like not everyone is going to be into it, or not even just that, whatever you're into, right?
Yeah. Everyone's got their own line in the sand they won't cross.
Can we just start
Correct.
a conversation real quick about the fact that, like, yes, we're a part of the gaining community. People are trying to get fat, and yes, we love fat, but, like, I am not sexually into every single gainer because I'm just not. Like, you're a homosexual male. Do you want to fuck every one of the 49% male population on the planet Earth? No, the fuck you don't.
Yeah.
Like, we've all got.
Everybody, I mean, you still have type, you still have preference.
Exactly. But that can go, that we could do a whole nother episode on that, and like messages I've got about, since I put myself out there, like I'm expected to respond to every message and flirt back and respond in 5 seconds, or like I'm a terrible person. And I'm like,
Girl,
this is online persona. I have a real life. And if, I'm engaging back, it's because I have time to, but I don't owe you. Like, thanks for following.
How many times have I said that, James? This idea that like, people treat it like it's like an image on a screen becomes an idea and not a person.
yes.
And like they forget that like you're a human who works a full-time job, has to pay bills, maybe has a relationship, maybe has stuff going on with their family, maybe has a dog you have to look after. I mean, there's a million things that pull your attention away from an online space. And I wish people had a little bit more respect for that.
Especially like on Grinder or Scruff or wherever, and they like hit you with like 5 messages like in 3 minutes, and there's like interested ? No ? Hello. And I'm like, give me a minute. Like obviously now it's a no.
Yeah.
But
it could have been a yes, but you were a fucking crazy bitch. So
back when I was on those dating and sex hookup apps, like, and someone was doing that, I once went off on somebody. I just couldn't take it anymore. I was like, do you not realize that I am an adult who is busy? Like, do you literally do nothing but sit there on your phone all day long? Because if so, that's a privilege. And it's one that I don't have.
Oh, girl.
Sometimes if I'm feeling feisty, I will say, just to be honest, like it could have worked. You're cute, but you're being too much and too aggressive, and it's not a good look
No, do you
to
know what,
mess
though?
up.
That is so necessary because I just feel like there is so not nearly enough accountability with like people acting like fucking crazy people. Like
Yeah,
that's the shit that people talk about with Grommr, right? Where it's like, oh, people being crazy with messages, people being all this and that, people being obsessive. And it's like, yeah, people are being wild and they're not being fucking humans. They're being fucking animals. You need to spray them with some like
yeah,
water and lemon juice in the eyeballs. Be like, sit, stop, sit, obey,
exactly.
calm down.
But you're the bad guy if you call it out. Like I'm always the asshole. I'm like,
Because you
you're
were
not as hot as you think you are. And I'm like, I didn't say that. I was just letting you know it's not a good look for anyone.
Desperation is never sexy.
no,
Yeah.
no, 100%. And look, I think every single person listening has been the desperate party. Let's be frank. I think every single one of us has been the creep, the obsessive, the dork, the whatever term language you want to fucking use. We've all been that. But you want to know something, son? At one point, you were a fucking like 5-year-old who didn't know that 2 + 2 = 5. You know what you did? You went to school and you fucking learned. And now you know that 2 + 2 actually equals 4 because you're a grown ass adult and you learn your shit. That's what you do as a human. Fun fact: you learn shit and then you proceed to not be a fucking dickhead past that point, right?
Well, if I woof at someone and I look and I've already messaged them and they didn't respond, I'm horrified. I'm like, oh my God, I'm deleting my account. I'm gonna block this person. They can't see that I woofed them again and they've already ignored me.
Now, do you want to know something I would say to that? Because this has happened to me before. Because like on Bigger City and Growler is the same thing. Like if a guy does something to his profile, like you don't keep the message history, it just deletes, right? So there was a guy that I saw him, I thought he was hot, hadn't seen his profile before, hadn't liked any of his pictures, and I messaged like, hey, you're looking really handsome. And he was like, you messaged me 3 months ago. And it was a no then, and it's a no now. And my response to that was,
So sorry.
sorry. Your no personality that clearly I couldn't even remember your existence is not my problem. Have a bit of confidence and keep your shit around for more than 3 months, then I would have known not to message you and waste my time. Thank you very much. Like, there's always a way to reposition it, you know? And I think kind of what we're talking about here for a moment, like with gaining, with silicone, saline, whatever we're doing body mod wise, you know, there really has to be a point where it's like, I get it. What we're doing is not part of the quote unquote norm. And so therefore there is potentially a sensitivity or a discomfort sometimes in having those conversations. But also, you're grown. And if you want to be out here having good times, you need to be willing to have those conversations. Otherwise, you are never going to like sit within a comfortable space. Like you were saying about owning your kink and fetish for yourself. It's not like you have to proclaim it from the rooftops and demand that everybody subscribe to your OnlyFans. You're just saying, I want to like live my life at peace with who the fuck I am, doing what is right by me. It is truly not asking the world. It is asking enough from yourself.
Yep. And just, moving forward, I mean, I do have partners now that aren't into infusions and injections, but like we already said, I'm not as big enough to make it completely about that.
Right.
So, but moving forward, I'm gonna need someone that's either okay with like my kink and like if they're not into it, they're not into it, or they're also into it and they enjoy it, especially with like body like growth and that kind of thing.
Boom.
That's very important.
Very that. I think Tim and I are both partnered to guys who don't participate in gaining, don't share that sense of kink, but they are both like kinksters or at least sexually open people themselves, and so like don't begrudge us our journeys. And Tim, are you, sorry to be presumptuous, in an open relationship with Matt?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because Tom and I are open, so it's like that's perfect. Like that other person does not feel obliged to have to perform for the things that I'm into, and vice versa. I don't feel a need to perform for Tom. Like, we can just go off and do our own thing because we had a fucking conversation like mature adults, and then it's just like there's no stress. It doesn't need to be stress. Why are we living in this fucking One Tree Hill 90210 bullshit where it's like the only way to validate my relationship is when I'm in some kind of complicated love throuple with my evil twin cousin 6 times removed with a buck tooth? Like, it doesn't need to be all that. You can just talk and be humans. Ugh.
Well, like Matt may not want to be my feeder, but he also knows that that's something that's intrinsic to my fetish. So like he's like, yeah, go get fed by somebody else. It's fine. And like, it's just great to know that like he can go off and play rugby and get what he needs from that, because that fulfills a lot of things for him, and I can stay at home while he's playing rugby and pig out and get full and stuffed and all that, and that fulfills me. And then later on we come back together again and you're like, how's your day? It was good. Like
The dream.
I love all this conversation. To step away from like hookups and dating for a sec, let's talk friendship, right? So I imagine that, like, as you say, you've been a bit up and down the path, you've done different cycles, you've tried things that not everyone's into. Like, how do you feel like that affects the way you make friends and just general social connections within the community? Because I feel like we also talk about this a fair bit. People really feel a sense of isolation at times. They don't know how to reach out and make some new friends. So what has that been like for you with what you do?
I went to one Grommr in New York when I was 21, maybe. No one talked to me. I was in the corner. Like, I tried to talk to people. I could talk to a wall. A lot of my career has been like, I get paid to be entertaining and talkative. But I find it very hard to make friends in the muscle gaining, like that community. I found that like the saline and the silicone community is much more not accepting, but like willing to meet and be friends and chat. I like have a few gaining friends, but a lot of people like don't want to meet up, or they flake. I mean, that's and like for anything, right? They flake. Yeah. But I find it very hard actually to make friends. And like I guess it's the same thing. Like, maybe I'm coming on too strong of wanting to be friends, but I think dating as a gay man for friends as an adult is hard to navigate anyway, because it's like, maybe you're hot, but I want friends. And like, if that leads to me sucking your dick, sure, I'm not gonna say no. But
you sound like me.
I was like, I'd love to be your friends. Like, I would love,
because I've said before, I said I'm not the best person to ask about that, because like I've slept with most of my friends. So
see, my gay friends I don't sleep with. Like, my best friend, we are both beefy bottoms. Like, we do not sleep together. We have a lot of tops that have, like, on the apps that have a fantasy of going from room to room and like taking turns, and we're like, we're not doing that. Like, that is not hot for us. We do not sleep together.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. But it's really hard actually, and it's kind of like depressing. Not depressing, that's a dramatic term. Yeah, but I wish I had more like beefy muscle gay friends that I could go to the gym with and then go pig out.
Yeah. It's very that. Like, I will say, and to throw Tim and I into the conversation here for a bit, when we first started doing this podcast, I think there were quite a few people who had an expectation that Tim and I were like dating, going to fuck,
or that we were at least going to sleep together at some point.
Yeah, and the whole time, Tim and I look at each other like, no, it feels like...
Well, and the friendship progressed quickly and got intense, and like we bonded in a way that I don't think either one of us expected. And so then it became much more of a like, no, at this point I kind of see you as a sibling, and like then it would be gross, because it would just feel weird. Like, it just would not feel right.
Yeah, like in a way I could see Tim naked and be like, oh god, he's out of his mind, coked out, I need to like...
I don't do that anymore.
Anymore, she says, right, 40th income.
No, I won't touch that shit now.
Oh, yeah, well,
that is growth.
But, like, I could see Tim naked and be like, oh gosh, I need to clothe him, and just, like, if Tim was like off his face drunk and like needed to be put in the shower, I could like push him in and like hose him down a bit and be like, yeah. But the thought of anything beyond that point, it would quite literally be like, do you want to have sex with your brother? And I'd be like, no,
thank you.
No, I don't. Yeah. But like, that's also a relationship, right? Like, and I think queer friendships are great because they do kind of prove that there is this in between. People are like, you're either friends or you're fucking, and it's like, you can be both sometimes. But people exist on a spectrum. Every relationship is different, and you don't need to oblige that. But also just like consensually feel your way and figure that out. Some people really into relationships with an expectation of this is what we're going to do because I do this with all my friends, or we do this, and it's like, no, girl, this is a proactive living thing between the two of us, and if I don't want it, it's not going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I would love a friends with benefits that if we could just like hang out, go to the gym. Like, I'm not really looking for a relationship right now. If it happens, it happens. But like someone that I could go to the gym with, you know, give ourselves our injections, go eat, and then go home and fuck. I would love that.
So like when you mentioned the silicone and saline injectable community, do you find that like, so maybe people who are kind of on the fringes, who we tend to like categorize as lurkers, you know, people like in the gainer community that kind of exist on the fringe, does anyone ever pressure you to get bigger, like there, to inject more and grow it more?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, people like, I guess it's the same thing with gaining, right? People have unrealistic expectations when they're horny of like, I'm gonna send you 20 Big Macs and you're gonna eat the whole thing and it's going to be great. And I'm like, cool, girl, I can barely eat 2, so no. But yes, in that, like, you know, injectable world, people are like, I want you massive, I want them like, you know, down to your knees, I want you to add 500 the next time. And it's
like,
just,
yeah, but then your skin would split. Like,
exactly, it's very unrealistic. And you know, some guys do add that much and it's very unsafe at a time. So like those guys, you know, they're turned on by them doing it and they're like, I want you to do it. If you come and stay with me, I'm gonna just keep pumping, like adding to you and make you huge. And then they come and then they disappear. You know, they finish and you don't hear from them again for a week until, you know,
100.
they're horny again. So yeah, I mean, it's the unrealistic, sexy fantasy of it. But and you know, you can get into conversations with it. Like if you're in, like I'm into role playing somewhat, but not, I don't think like that unrealistic.
Yeah,
Not really.
that's fair. I did have a bit of a random one here. Like, are there any like tools or toys like in relation to, you know, kind of generalized like modding, I guess you could say, things like penis weights and ball stretchers. Like, do you have any experience with items like that, or perhaps anything you might recommend to someone who's, you know, again interested in this world of modding, but like wanting to take some baby steps into things?
Yeah, I never really got into the ball stretching. Like I said, I'm not really into ball play, which is a kind of ironic. That is like what I'm focused on growing, but definitely like penis pumps, you know, it's a great start, and then you can get into like the full package pumps. Like I have a bowl master that's that does the whole package. So it's like, I feel like that's the starter to get into it, and then you can see what it feels like. And that's also dangerous. That can, you know, cause a lot of problems, and injury is very prone there if you do it too hard. But again, just making sure you do your research on all that stuff. But like pumps are very available. I think Amazon has them. I think
yeah,
like
everybody has
all
them.
the local sex
They're
shops.
not hard to find.
No, they're very easy. So I would definitely say that one.
No.
For sure.
Now,
same with like nipple pumps. Like before I got mine pierced for the 3rd time, I used to pump them all the time. I think like big juicy nipples are really hot, but I kind of stopped. I know you can. I think you can pump them with rings in if you have a big enough pump, but mine are like super sensitive. So if someone like sucks on them, they're like raw for 4 days after. So I'm like, maybe not.
I get that.
Yeah.
I did want to ask, I think, is potentially the time to talk about the most infamous situation, of course, that we mostly in the bear, chub, chaser, gainer communities are aware of when it comes to silicone. The unfortunate stories around Jack Chapman and, of course, Get Bigger, who was, in my opinion, one of the most prolific gainers, especially in my younger years. I mean, God, I remember being 12, 13, finding his WordPress and just being obsessed with this man. It was him and Fat Fan Plus. Like, to my brain, they were the only two gainers on the internet, and I was like, these are the only other people in the universe that are like me. So obviously, that was, I think, a definite tough time for the people who knew them, for the community at large in terms of grieving. And obviously, I think there's a huge conversation around the events that we're not going to go into here. Again, y'all are grown, go to Google, you can find out the sort of timeline of the events that have happened. But the reason I want to bring that up is because I want to ask you how that situation impacted you personally. Like, I'm not presuming if you knew these people, but at that point, were you injecting? Were you toying with ideas? Did it have an effect on how you felt about it at the time? I would love to hear from you, like, what that was like for you.
No, I just started injecting last year for silicone. Saline I've been doing for a few years before, so this was like way after. Like, I did the same thing. I subscribed to the WordPress, the newsletters, all that stuff. Very turned on by, and that's kind of where my, cartoonish figure kink started, was when I stumbled upon that group. I don't know too much about the whole situation, just headlines that I've seen. I know it is a very unique situation, but for me, I mean, it just, you realize the dangers of what you're doing, and just have to weigh those options and know that there could be fatal consequences.
I have to admit that those stories do make me very, very nervous for people that engage in this, because like I've said before, and I'll say again, I don't judge anyone for wanting to do this. I don't think that it makes you unusual or weird or a bad person to want to body modify with silicone. But my fear is always like, yeah, there's complications. There are things that can go wrong if it's not well contained. Bits of it can flake off, get into your bloodstream, cause an embolism. Like, I've always had a concern for people that engage in this, just because, like, with all of the wild variables that can come in, it's like, so for you personally, Thick Bro, how do you weigh that, like the potential consequences versus the benefit?
I will say I am a ball of nerves for when you're doing it to about 10 days after. I'm a very anxious person anyway, so it's, you kind of just have to weigh, like, I'm doing it properly, correctly, making sure that everything's done the way you're supposed to be doing it.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of have to feel confident with how you do it. Make sure you know what needs to be done. If for some reason there is something that goes wrong, someone needs to be know what you're doing. So I think that's really, you just kind of have to weigh your options, right? Like, very separate, different, because a doctor's doing it, but you're going in for a boob job, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. You got to weigh your options. Any elective surgery going under anesthesia is dangerous.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously they test your heart and all that stuff, but there's so, like, it's the same thing. The list of things that could go wrong are just as long for that, but they're just a little different. So you kind of have to just make that choice for you of what's worth it.
You said that situation was very unique, and I think it's really good for us to consider that, because outside of that scenario, I don't know any other examples of things going wrong, and I do feel that we would hear more about it if that was so the case. And as you say, it's not that there isn't the potential, but it seems to me like yourself being very well informed, and also others, are probably very cautious when it comes to these things,
Yeah, there are definitely other fatalities out there. I think they were just, kind of on the precipice of influencers in the gay, when Twitter like just started with the gay stuff, and make, like, that's where the influencers really started, and they were kind of at the peak of that.
Right.
But there are plenty of guys that have passed from it. The community is very small once you are enhanced. So everyone does know each other. They check up on it, like each other.
When you have that community vibe, I would imagine that the people within that space feel very protected and supported. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say so. There's definitely people on there that will put you in check if there's a new person in that community and they're like, I've saw this online yesterday and I want to do it tomorrow. Like everyone is like, no, you're not ready. You need to do your research. Like we're not and again, like I think my point that I want to get across by doing this with you guys also is I'm not glamorizing this. Like I said, I did have a setback and had to get checked medically, but it's definitely, I'm not glamorizing this. I'm not glamorizing steroids, any of that. This was my journey, how I, decided to come to this decision for me. I think I guess the moral compass of this TED talk that I'm just doing right now is this was my journey and what was right for me. And I'm not doing it because someone messaged me and was like, I want you to do this. Like, I'm your daddy, I'm your sir, you're my sub, do this. If that's your dynamic, that's up to you, but you need to make the right decisions for your health. I know in gaining, there are extreme circumstances where people are gaining and they don't care about health issues, right? There are extreme circumstances that they want onset diabetes or early, whatever that word is. But that's again their choice. That's right. It's right for them. That's their journey. Who are we? I mean, I guess this is a larger conversation of let them do you, that this is what you're doing. Like, this is not, my body's not up for discussion.
Yeah.
I have decided to make this journey. I am not pushing my morals on anyone else. If you would like to do that, I'm happy to talk about my personal journey with everything, but I am not trying to glamorize it by any means.
I think that's totally fair. I think when we had the conversation leading up to this episode, and again, thank you for being so candid with us today. This is a difficult conversation to have because in order to have it, we need to be willing to listen and we need to be willing to learn and understand as well. It isn't something that is a boogeyman or bad, but it's also not all good. It is like almost everything in existence, truly a neutral concept. Whether it is good or bad is what you choose to do with it, and it comes again down to choice. We've talked a bit about gain shaming before, trying to gatekeep how people gain, where they gain, what they eat to gain, how fast they gain, the quality of food they consume, for fuck's sake. Anything, right? People out here trying to tell people what to do and how to do it. But don't do that. Listen to people, learn their perspective. And if someone's on a journey that is not for you, no matter how little or extreme that not for you-ness is the case, don't be a cunt. Leave
it's
alone.
Super simple to click that unfollow button.
Yeah.
I have done it to multiple people that I am personally annoyed by or not into anymore. Just unfollow. I don't need
100%.
to message angry things or you're not doing it right, like you said.
Yeah. Can we normalize I don't like what I'm seeing. I have to be the one to go now? Because there's this real thing on the internet where it's like, I don't like what I'm seeing, you should die. And that's a very that tells me that your parents didn't discipline you as a child. So I feel like we need to really start to rein it in.
Yeah, I mean, you might not like it, but there are plenty of other followers that I have that are really enjoying.
See, I'm never surprised by stuff like that, though, because with the amount of complaining that certain people will do about programs that are on television or whatever, and it's like, rather than just turn the TV off, they decide to throw a huge stink about something or a book that they don't like, so they get it banned from their children's library or some shit like that. This stuff never surprises me. People just won't walk away from something. They feel like, I don't like this, so now I have to attack and destroy it.
Well, that was like my Instagram. I used to have it private. And then, I did Twitter and I was like, that doesn't make sense. So let's open that up. But when I was private, I still had people, I would go through, I didn't really do, blank profiles. They had to have pictures and post regularly. But I would have people like report my stories. And I'm like, you chose to follow me, and based off of what I saw, you were into gaining. So why? That's what I don't understand. Like, just unfollow me. You don't need to.
It's this really weird thing of like people don't want to coexist with things that they don't like. It's very like think about the Lion King. Everything the light touches is our land. And if
Yeah.
there's light and I can see it, you're in my land. No matter how many kilometers away that is, you're in my line of sight. Get off. Like you have crossed toe onto my thing. I will burn it. I will cut it off with a machete. Like people are wild, and it really does kind of hint to this like I don't know, vibe of I own everything or something like that, which kind of
That's
comes
called privilege.
privilege girl, which kind of comes back to the whole like why we gain in the first place, because society says what you want to do with your body is not correct. How dare you live a different thing in your body than what we said you should do? You want to be bigger, you want to put, silicone and saline in places. That's disgusting. How dare you? You should feel shamed for this. So again, I think that's that conversation we were talking about where it's consent, it's investigating things for you, and it's also remembering to just do things for you because you've got to go to bed with you. No one else does. You were born alone, you'll die alone, and you've got to be comfortable with who and what you are at the end of the day, so just do that.
Yep.
Oh, but Thick, this is the end of the episode, and I don't want it to end, but it's the end, and thank you so fucking much for being here today. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. I've loved the other episodes that you guys had, so I'm honored to be on here.
Thank you. Now listen, where can the listeners find you online?
I am on Twitter and Instagram as thiccbro21.
thiccbro21. Well, you hear it here first, everybody. But that's the end for another episode here on Thicc Radio. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram and BeefyFrat at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and BeefyFrat at ThiccyMouse. You can also look us up on Instagram and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at www.podpage.com/ThiccRadio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can find the link in the show notes. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Anchor app podcast produced by Stan and Thicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by Stan.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.